and good morning. Our goal for this session is actually one thing and one thing only, and that is how do you improve the quality of your responses when you ask AI a question? Listen, I've had the privilege of teaching over 500 students in the last year alone. And do you know what's the number one frustration that they have? It's not about, hey, how AI can do this or that. Can it make a livable prototype? Can it actually build a deck for me? Their number one concern they have is like, how can I actually improve the quality of my responses? Because quality response matters because it directly impacts the quality of your output. And more importantly, it directly impacts how much effort you put in and how much time you save. Right? So today I want to actually demystify the process of how do you get better responses. Now remember, AI is not going to give you the right answer, but it can do quite a bit of the heavy lifting in which it'll give you lots of good options for you to choose from, and then you pick what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So in order to do that, what I like to do today is I like to do four things, right? Number one is I want to share with you a story about Anna. Anna is actually a student and a client. Um, and we're going to go through two scenarios. The scenario is that we're going to ask AI how to generate user stories with a simple prompt or a simple question. And then we're going to do the same task with a well-structured prompt. And then we'll compare the results and we'll talk about Anna's experience. Second is we're going to actually then do a deep dive on the prompt itself as to why a well-structured prompt most likely and most consistently gives you better responses. And what is it about that prompt? And we'll break it down. And then last but not the least is when you take that concept, you can do a whole lot of things. And I'm going to show you what top PMs do by just using this one simple technique, right? And then that will end our session for today. But if you guys want to stick around, I actually have an exercise for the next 30 minutes in which we'll actually go through the same exercise that we are actually going to do with Anna, in which you actually bring your own context and we'll write a user story together and we'll compare it. So if you guys have time, I would love for you to stick around. So with that being said, let's jump into it. Oh, by the way, intros are important, yeah. My name is Mustafa Kapadia. I have been in product and innovation space for, oh my God, for more than 20 years. Most recently, I used to run product at Google, where we actually built innovation accelerators in which Googlers and our customers and clients would come together and we would build products together. Before that, I used to run with IBM, run product at IBM. I actually ran a consulting practice on product at IBM as well. And then before that with Deloitte. Right now, I actually quit Google last year trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And I've been spending most of my time actually helping product managers and actually product teams and product organizations adopt AI so they can actually be more productive and more effective. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to connect with product managers. So if you send me a request, I'll definitely accept, or you can actually get to my newsletter. Everything that we see here today, by the way, is you can get it on this link. Actually, let me put that in chat. Let's see if I get that. Let me put this in chat. So all the resources that we're going to go through here today, it's going to be in this link. So you can follow along. And once we're done with this, I'm actually going to upload the video as well. So let's, so with that being said, let's go into Anna's story. And like I said, actually, let me introduce you to Anna. And by the way, Anna is a real person. I just changed the name. She's a client and a student. So here's Anna, right? She's passionate about building products. She's ambitious, but she's also overworked. She's a senior PM at a bank. She has over 5 years of experience. She's customer centric. She's detail oriented. She, like most product managers, has a tendency to taking on too much work, right? And she's a big fan of using AI. Now, today, unfortunately, Anna is feeling a bit overwhelmed. She supports the digital home mortgage platform. And what she's noticed is that for people who are applying mortgages for the first time homeowners, they're taking too long to verify their income and their employment. And that ends up having an impact on the entire mortgage processing process. It takes much longer for them to approve. It's not a great experience for the user. It's not a great experience for the bank. And so Anna's boss has come to her and said, hey, you know what? We actually need to come up with user stories. We need to have a come up with user stories for this particular scenario with this particular feature. And we need to share it with engineering and get their take on it. Now, usually this takes Anna some time, but given the tight timeline, she only has 2 days. Now, with Anna being a big fan of AI, she actually has two choices. She can ask a very simple query, or she can ask what I'm calling a well-structured question. And so let's go through both, right? And a simple query is actually when most of my students come to my boot camp, this is usually how they interact with AI, right? They say, can you please write me 10 user stories for the digital income and employment verification tool for home mortgages? So actually, let's do that, right? I actually want to show this to you guys. So let me actually copy this over. Hold on. And so I'm just going to go into ChatGPT. I'm actually going to create a new window, and we're going to run through this. And like most of you guys, this will give us 10 responses, right? So as you can tell, not surprising, it kind of goes through and says, as a borrower, it gives you a bunch of user stories. It gives you from a lender's perspective, and it gives you from employers and payroll. And frankly speaking, this is a good place to start, right? This is a good baseline. And Anna can probably take, since she's focusing on first-time home buyers, she can probably take some of these and start working on them and creating user stories. And frankly speaking, it'll probably save her maybe an hour or two by just doing that. But we're not happy being there, right? We want the AI to do more and more of the heavy lifting. So let's take a look and see what does the same task look like if you ask a well-structured question. So let's go down to actually, let me actually open up. So a well-structured question, unfortunately, or fortunately, is much more detailed. And so same question or same task in which you want to generate user stories. I'm going to go more into detail, but let me kind of give you the 5 components or the 5 keys. Is number 1 is first you provide the AI with a role. You're giving the AI a job, and you're going to ask them to act like an expert in generating user stories. Then, instead of just saying that I want to create user stories for employment and income verification for home mortgages, you're going to give them a lot more context. So you can give them product description, you can give them the feature that you talked about, what's the benefit to the user, who's the user, what's the pain point. Then you're going to go down and say, okay, for the user stories, here are the best practices, here are the instructions of how I want you to write the user story. And so you can put this down here and here, and we'll go more detail. You'll tell them the format that you want it in, and you're actually going to give them an example. So let's actually just copy this whole thing, and then let's put it back into our chat. And so this time around, we're going to use a well-structured prompt. And then let's take a look at what the results are. So the first thing you'll notice is that it is very much focused and detailed on the first-time home buyer, as opposed to the simple query that kind of goes across all users, right? You'll also notice that it's a lot more detailed, and it focuses on the pain point that we actually highlighted. And so the best judge of character here, of course, is Anna, because she is actually most familiar with this task. But since Anna is not here, let's actually just use the AI to see how we compare it to the results. Right? And whenever I do comparison, I actually like to look at 4. I actually look at 8 dimensions, but for today, let's just do 4. Please compare the 2 responses across, let's say, relevancy. Clarity. Clarity is important simply because, remember, At the end of the day, you're writing a user story for an audience, and you want to make it as clear as possible. So even if when Anna gives it to engineering, she is they are easy to understand and it makes their life easier. So clarity is very important. Of course, I don't know how to spell clarity. Let's call it user-centric or empathy. So you want to make sure that they address the user's pain points and needs. So let's compare that across that. And the last but not the least is it needs to be detail-oriented, right? So now let's take a look at how the simple query versus well-structured response looks at, right? Um, let's see, it usually gives me a table. Um, you please give me a table. So if you look at it, just like looking at a baseline about if you ask for a simple query versus a well-structured query, you can see the difference in your results, right? With relevancy, there's a broad focus, while this is very highly focused because we actually provided more instructions or we provided more context. With clarity, the first one is generic, but the second one is clear with actionable stories, right? Because we actually gave the AI instructions about how to write user stories. Empathy is it misses some nuances, it has some empathy. Um, but the second one is directly addresses the pain point. And again, this goes back to the context we provided. And of course, detail oriented, in which the second response is actionable, it's testable. And these things are important. And by the way, if you guys stick around and we actually do the exercises, we'll go through some of the same comparison, in which we will write your user stories and you can actually go through your same analysis and see if the second one actually helps you or not. And the reason these things are important, because ultimately what this means is that you get to complete your task a lot faster. Number one is you actually have a better pool of candidates of user stories to choose from. And because you have a better pool of candidates of user stories to choose from, the amount of effort you put in is going to be less. Now, you're not going to take all 10, of course, because that's not what the point of AI is. It's not going to give you the right answer. But what it's going to give you is a better set of options to choose from. And then you can pick and choose which one you want to go for. You can edit this the way you want to. If you want to create more, you can ask it to create more. And what it ultimately means that it saves you more time. So if you go back to Anna, and let's go back to her experience. Is that here's really what it comes down to. With a simple prompt, she may have been able to save 1 to 2 hours. She still has to do the heavy lifting, right? She has to put in more effort in editing and refining. If she wants to spar with the AI, she still has to do that and continue to do it. Remember, we got these responses in our first shot. But with well-structured prompt, in her experience, she ended up saving 6 hours. That's a huge difference by just asking the questions in a different format. And for me, how you ask questions is extremely important. We spend so much time about all the things that AI can do. Very few PMs, in my experience, actually spend time on how they ask questions. And all this well-structured prompt does is that we're asking much more detailed questions. And by doing that, not only do you save time, but more importantly, you have less effort, right? The AI is doing, the LLM is doing more of the heavy lifting so that you don't have to. And you end up creating better user stories, which ultimately means that you actually have a much happier customer or stakeholder who you're presenting to. Let me pause here for a minute, see if you have any questions. And I want to actually do a breakdown on why this prompt works this way. Okay. So So what's the secret? I kind of alluded to it earlier, and this is what I call the 5 keys, and it's the 5 keys to unlock great results, is that number one is you want to assign it a role. By giving AI a role, you're actually giving it an experience. Think of AI as the analogy I like to use in my classes, think of AI as a really smart intern. And so you can tell the intern, I want you to do this. And not just that, but you're going to say, I want you to be an expert in this task. And so assigning role is by far one of the most effective ways to make sure that you're going to get good results back. Second is you want to provide the right input. And there's a lot of debate about what right input is, but in my experience, the more context you provide about what you're trying to do, like in our case, in the scenario with Anna, we provided very little input and you still got great results. If you actually add more stuff, if you actually add more user pain points, if you actually add more details on your product, if you actually add more details on your features, you're going to get even much better results, right? It's very important to give specific instructions. Like AI, the AI is smart enough to know what a user story is. So you'll notice that in the first response and the second response, it followed a good user story format. As a user, I want to do this, so I can do that. And depending on the model, it'll either do that or not. But that's not enough. You have to give it more instructions, and I'll show you what that means. But you have to be prescriptive about best practices, because that is how you would give an instructions to an intern. If an intern is you want to tell him or her, here's how I want you to write it. There has to be detail, they have to be testable, they have to be jargon-free, they cannot be leading. All of those best practices that we know as PMs, you put that in your instructions. You're taking your experience and you're putting it here into the instructions, right? 4 and 5 is really about how AI should respond. So 1, 2, and 3 is talking about what to do. 4 and 5 is I want you to respond in a certain format. And so again, you're going to specify the format and you're going to give it a good example. And you can give it multiple examples. You can actually even give it bad examples, but you want to give AI how to get back to you. And how to get back to you is important because that means it's easier for you to read the results, easier for you to digest it, easier for you to then figure out how you can use what part of the results you can use and how you can convert that into your final product or your final deliverable. And so let's break it down, right? I assign it a role. You'll notice that I've actually given it 2 roles. Number 1 is you're the most experienced person when it comes to building great products, and you're an expert in generating user stories. I also give it a personality because I like to have things in certain points. So I tell them about the tone. Second is I provide the input. And in an input, I'm really looking for high-level description of the product. What is the feature? And not just the feature, but how does it benefit the user? Who's the user? So notice in the first one, it went through all different users because we didn't specify who the user was. In this case, we're talking about first-time home buyers. And last but not the least is we're putting in what are the pain points that you want to do. And all the market research that you do, you can embed it right here into the prompt. And then you give it specific instructions. And again, this could be best practices that you get off the web. This is best practices based on your experience. But I tell them create 10 stories. Stories are independent. They can be tested. They have to be detailed. They have to be user-centric. And they have to avoid technical jargon. The more you put into your instructions, the more you put into your best practices, the better off you'll be with the results that you get. And then the format and examples are fairly easy. Number 1 is I want to make sure it always gives me in the format of as a user, I want this, so it can do that benefit. And then I give it an example, right? And what you're doing here is that you're forcing AI to answer your questions in a certain way. In the first question, In the simple format, AI had to do a lot of guessing. All of these inputs that we put in, by the way, AI had to guess those inputs, which is why when you ask a simple query, you get responses all over the place because the AI doesn't know where to focus. And so what AI is going to do is it's going to give you a huge, it's a scattergun approach. It's going to give you a little bit of everything because it doesn't really know what you want. By asking a more prescriptive question, by asking the well-structured question, by using the 5 keys, you're being very specific, right? And so what does it mean to you? Listen, if you use a well-structured prompt, you're going to get better results, right? And we can test it out, and you can test it out in the exercise. You can test it out at the show at the end of the lightning lesson. But remember, garbage in is garbage out, right? You ask a simple question, you're going to get lots of different responses. But if you could provide the right context, you provide the right instructions, you specify the right format, the 5 keys that we talked about, what you're going to get, how you're going to benefit is number one, is you're going to get more relevant and high quality responses. Second is AI does the heavy lifting, right? You are the one who finalizes which options to choose. AI is not going to do that for you. This is where the human AI synergy works so well. We haven't really talked about this, but these prompts are reusable, which means that you can actually go in, you write this prompt once, and you want to write user stories again for something else, all you need to do is change the red. Because the intelligence of how to write the user story is already built in, right? Lucas, I see your hand raised. Just give me a minute, yes? And by doing all those things, ultimately, the benefit to you is that it helps you save more time that then you can do for anything else that's important to you. Spend more time on your strategic projects, spend more time talking to your customers, or heck, spend more time just being with your friends and family. And this is the key to supercharging your productivity, right? We want to use AI so that we can use it most effectively, so it makes our lives easier without compromising on our ability to still do the critical thinking. The critical thinking actually goes into 2 areas. It goes into how you ask the question, because remember, all of those things that we talked about, the input, the instructions, the format, the role, that's our knowledge that we're embedding into the AI. And then second is that when it gives us the responses, it is our experience and knowledge in which we pick and choose which option to move forward to. We don't take it blindly, right? And so ultimately, the better you get asking questions, the more time you'll save and the more productive you'll be. And if you follow the 5 keys, you'll be surprised and amazed at what AI can do for you, right? And so I kind of shared with you the playbook a little bit, but here's what we end up doing and actually in our boot camp. And this, I think this one is 30. I actually have one that's 100 tasks, but think about all of these tasks are written using the well-structured prompt. You can brainstorm new ideas, write epics, prioritization, create summaries. You can create personas, generate a day in a life. You can actually do user research. You can synthesize user feedback. You can help a lot with the UX and UI, building context structures, writing copy for UX. We talked about generating user stories. That's what we focused on today, but you can actually do the same thing for acceptance criteria. You can create test cases. You can create product roadmaps. You can use go-to-market research, competitive analysis, industry trends, and you name it. And if you click on any of these things, they all follow that same format. And the reason for that is to get to your answer quicker with a bunch of options that will actually be much more meatier for you to use. And so if you go through it, and it's quite, generate a life, a day in a life of persona. Again, it goes through the same thing. Or create a persona. Sorry, you'll go through that. There is a sample. What I've done is there's a sample playbook that's in the if you click the link in the chat and on the top of the chat with all the resources, there's a sample playbook of my top 5 most popular prompts. So you guys can take a look at that and you can use that to test. Let me go one more thing, and then Lucas, I will actually ask you a question. Yes. Now the question I keep getting, and I know we're almost out of time, is this enough? Is this all that I need to master AI so I can actually be more productive? And I wish I could tell you yes, but unfortunately, no. In addition to this, you really start getting crazy productive and you start using AI more effectively is when you take what you write about how you write well-structured prompts and then you marry it with these skills, right? So how AI works, the mindset is very important. How do you know which LLM to pick? Like I choose ChatGPT, but I don't use ChatGPT for everything. I use different AIs or LLMs for different tasks. And knowing that is half the battle because it can make the difference between getting a good response and not so good response. We talked briefly about human AI synergy. I think it's very important to know what AI can do and what AI cannot do, and how you can actually work well with AI. Microtask is one of probably the most important things to learn. A lot of people go to AI and say, can you please write me in PRD? AI will do it, but it is too big of a document for the AI to do it well. And so you want to use microtasks in which you break the document down into smaller pieces. Personalization is very important, right? Actually, here, you know what? To me, personalization is a fantastic one. So let's, at the end, Lucas, after I ask you a question, I'm going to give you a demo on personalization if people want to stick around, in which you can actually train AI on your organization, on your role, on your team, and then marry the well-structured prompt with personalization to give you fantastic results. So for example, if she's getting ready, Anna's getting ready to prepare for the engineering meeting, she can actually ask her co-pilot to say, hey, I'm about to meet with Dave. What are the questions Dave is going to ask me so that she can be better prepared for the meeting? Creating prompt libraries, I kind of shared that with you. How do you look at, evaluate, and refine responses? We didn't go much into that, but that's a great skill. Measuring results. How do you overcome biases? And then what are the specific tools? I use most of the LLMs most of the time, but there are new tools coming out which you can use to actually supercharge what you're doing. With that being said, let me just end it here and then I'll take the questions, right? So if what you hear today is interesting and if you're ready to transform, listen, your PM role is transforming. The way we work now is not going to be the way you're going to work in the future. And so if you're interested in mastering AI, and I talk more practical stuff, right? Like stuff that you can use today in your job. If that's what you want to master so that you can save 10 hours a week, deliver better results, deliver a better impact, and advance your career, take a look at my course, right? There's a discount going on in which you can get $100 off. If you click on the link, it will get you there. And the discount's available till 120, I believe. But with that being said, I am going to pause here. Like I said, all the resources and recording are here. And then whoever wants to stick around, we can do more exercises. I can show you more demos of how we can actually do the personalization, about how you can reuse the prompts. And by the way, those prompts that we have, the way they've been written, you can reuse them across all LLMs. So I could have used that against Claude, against Gemini, which makes my life easier because if I'm exhausted with the suggestions for user stories with ChatGPT, I can go to another LLM and get a whole different set of responses. So I'm going to pause there. Lucas, thank you very much for being patient. Please, what can I help? What can I do for you?
Well, Mustafa, thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask one question. Actually, on the 5 keys that you shared, so they perfectly make sense. On key number 2, you specifically mentioned regarding the input that you gave, right?
Yes.
That from your experience, you can tell that this is input you would give for this type of task that you want to then actually
Yes.
the Gen AI to perform. Now, let's say we are talking about a different task or about an area, or we don't have the expertise yet, so we don't feel comfortable with providing the input because maybe it will be the wrong input. How successful will it be to just ask the AI to actually tell us which input it will need to perform the task best? Have you
Yeah.
ever tried this? Does it work?
I have. I think that it's a great question. And by the way, in the 5 keys, actually, Lucas, that's a great question, and thank you for asking. In the 5 keys, deciding what is the right dimensions of input is where most of my students struggle with, right? Um, and I wish I could tell you, Lucas, is a simple answer. But what I usually tell people is that the first thing is, if they're an experienced PM, most of the time, if you have an intern, you kind of know what information to provide the intern to for that intern to be successful, right? And I usually tell people, start there. And with AI, it's never a once and done thing. It's an iterative process, right? The prompts that you see in my guidebook, I have iterated over them over, I don't know, I spent thousands of hours perfecting these prompts because every time I learn something new and I keep iterating again and again. But to come back to your question is, number one is start with your experience, because that to me is actually a lot more valuable than anything else, because that is your brain that you're actually putting into, or your thoughts you're putting into the AI. If you're not happy with the results, if they're not relevant, if they're not clear, if they're not empathetic or user centric, then you can ask the AI what else I can provide you, or you can actually go on the web. And both of the resources are great. But again, when you ask AI whatever you want to provide you, chances are AI is going to give you at least 10 to 12 things to input. It seems like the default in all of these AIs is to give you a list of 10, or at least 10 or 15. But 10 or 15, to be honest with you, is way too much, in my opinion. I mean, you can do it, but imagine if you had to run that same prompt again now for a different user or a different product. You're always going to end up doing lots and lots more. So you have to find the right balance, because ultimately what you want AI to do is spit out a whole bunch of user stories for you. And then you want to then take that list of user stories and then refine them or call them even smaller so that you can actually put it into your final artifact, right? So a lot of it is iterative, in my opinion. Lucas, I hope that helps.
That was a pretty clear answer. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. Matthew, we'll stick around for personalization and developing and long-term memory. I think that's awesome. Thank you, Matthew. We can go into that, but let me see if there's any other questions. I know we're over our time, so if you guys have to drop off, I completely understand. I'll send out the recording of our talk as well as the exercise in the next 24 to 48 hours, whatever Maven allows me to do. Let's see, I think we have one more question. Oh, Ellen, thank you very much for your kind words. Anmol, thank you for your kind words as well. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's do this. I am actually going to let me go through personalization, and actually let me show you the reusability piece, because I think, one of the concerns I get from my students is like, Mustafa, do I really have to write this prompt? I mean, think about this. This is a long prompt. Like, do I really have to write one page every time I ask a question? And what I tell them is, I said that, listen, you write this once, and if you write it well, reuse it 100 times. And that's why you see the black versus the red. The black is static, The red is dynamic. The red is what you keep changing again and again. So we ran this for a first-time home buyer. But let's just say in this scenario, Anna's boss comes back to her and says, you know what? I actually want you to do the same thing for the loan processing officer because they have the same issues. So now, well, you come in and let's see if I actually have this. I think I have this somewhere. I'm going to take the same thing and I'm going to make my life easy. All I'm going to do is I'm going to change the input. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to go back in here. Actually, you know what? I actually don't want to change this prompt because I use this library for something else. So I'm actually going to go back here. I'm actually going to start a new window. I'm going to go down here and I am going to change this part. I think the product remains the same. The feature remains the same. The user is changed, is different. So let me go back here. And I think the user and the user pain points are different. I'm going to go here. Sorry, where am I? And I will, this is the problem with the windows sometimes. There you go. I'm going to do that. But then the AI is great, but the UX can definitely use a little bit of help. And I'm just going to put in the loan processing officer and instructions. Let me just see if the prompt is still whole. So we have a role, we have input, and in input we have product description, we have feature description, we have the benefit, the user, and the pain point. So all I did here in this case, just to show you the reusability of the prompt, is that I used that same question. I just changed the inputs. And you'll notice that the prompt has now given me really good responses for a loan processing officer and their pain points. And so spend the time writing the questions well. And then use the dynamic and static part in which the dynamic part keeps changing. The static part, like the instruction of how you write user stories doesn't change. The example doesn't change. The role doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the input. So if you write it well, and you write it once, you can use this again and again and again, right? So that's one part. Let me go through and talk about the personalization piece, right? So I have actually trained the AI on Anna. So let's go back to, is this the one? Is this the one we used? Let's say that Anna is interested in these. I'm just gonna make it up, right? Anna decides that these three are the ones that she wants to go and share to her engineering team. And so I'm going to go into Anna's personal copilot and say, I like these user stories. And I think I'm going to give it a bit more information for the following feature. And the feature is, there's the feature. So the feature is digital income and employment verification tool. And I have a meeting with believe the name of the engineering manager is Priya. Priya. What type of questions will she ask me? And because the AI knows about Anna and knows about Priya and Priya's role and a few personality traits about Priya and what's important to Priya, it's actually going to take this and say, here are the questions Priya is likely to ask you. Right? It says that Priya is a front-end engineer focused on user design, and these are the things that she's passionate about. She's user-focused, she's passionate about creating intuitive, visually appealing interfaces, and she likes detailed questions. And so here are the potential questions that Priya can ask you. And now you have now taken, remember I told you the power is when you actually combine the two skills. You take the well-structured prompt, and then you take the personalization, and now you can do a lot more with AI than you could before. So now not only will the AI give you the user stories you want, but now you can actually go into the meeting knowing what potential questions that Priya is going to ask you. You can even go back and say, you know what? How do I sell these ideas to Lisa? And Lisa is Anna's direct manager, I believe. And so it will tell you what is the best way to communicate with her. And now you can take this, and by the way, I don't know if I've actually trained this AI on Anna's OKRs and so on, but you can actually look at it through OKRs or her metrics and say, how do these align with my metrics? But there's a whole bunch of things that you can actually now chat with by teaching Anna, by using Anna's personal copilot. So to me, when you add the ability of well-structured prompts and the skills that we talked about before, you can really do some amazing things. And it can save you massive amount of time, and it can improve your quality dramatically. And those are the kind of things that will make you stand out. We didn't talk about number 8, which is measuring results. To me, it is one of the most important skills. Anytime you do this, I tell this to my students, and I'm going to tell this to you too. Automation or using AI is fantastic, and it's cool and it's sexy. But you know what? If you can actually quantify the benefits, that's what's going to get you promoted. And so how you measure results is just as important. All right, so with that being said, I know we still have a few people here. So let's do the exercise if you guys are up for it. Yes? So you're going to do exactly what I did with Anna. So just, you can use this and you can put that in a new chat window, right? In a new chat window, just say, please write 10 user, or please 10, I don't know how to write clearly. Please write 10 user stories for product feature. Let me actually fix that, please. Write 10 user stories. I can actually put this in chat too, so you guys don't have to write that again. And go ahead and whatever feature or whatever product that you're building, just take a few minutes, don't spend too much time, and put this down, right? And then run the prompt. And it's 10:45, so let's do it like in the next, I apologize, it's gonna be a rush exercise. So let's do, maybe take maybe a minute or two and just write this down. Right. Any questions so far before, while you guys are experimenting? Oh, this is fantastic. I just had a whole bunch of invites of LinkedIn. I love it. I love it when people connect with me. So please do. Okay, I see some in chat. Shirley, thanks. Thanks for joining. I know you have to run, but I appreciate it. Lucas, you're welcome. Evie, based on your experience, will you be able to share the difference between the various LLM tools when you would use Claude versus Gemini versus Chat GPT? Um, I do. In fact, I actually have a whole section in my course, but at a high level, if I want to do writing or brainstorming or generation, I usually use AI ChatGPT. If I want to do analysis, I usually use Claude, although if you have 0.1 for ChatGPT, it's getting better and better. And then I usually use Gemini for what I call overflow, right? So for example, if I didn't like any of the 10 user stories or 20 user stories or 30 user stories that were created um, in ChatGPT, then I'll use that same prompt and go to Gemini and I'll go to Claude, and then it'll give me a whole set of new results. And the reason is because each LLM is fundamentally trained a little bit differently. And so you're gonna get things that you have not seen in one or the other. So that's how I use Gemini right now. So Evie, I hope that helped. All right, we are at 2 minutes. So I just want you to hold on to it. If you had a chance, just look through the results. We're now gonna do, we're gonna do a well-structured prompt. So here's the link. I am actually going to link you to the playbook that we have. This is the top 5 playbook that I was talking about. You guys will have, it's not a, you guys will have to make a copy of it, right? So there's the playbook. Go to the playbook, make a copy of the file, since you will not be able to edit it directly. Find the prompt. I think it's prompt number 4, if I'm not mistaken, in the playbook. Let me see. It is, yes, it's actually prompt number 4, right? So go to that prompt, and then just play around with the input. And so for the input, and then once you get the input, you can run the prompt, you can run it. So for the input, think about these things, right? So for a product description, think about a quick product overview, what the user problem you're trying to solve, what's the desired outcome. For the feature, give it a short description and a user benefit. For the user, you can use, I usually tell people to pick only one user because it gives you much better results. And then talk about the user pain points, frustrations, or feelings. This one takes a bit more time to do, but see what you can do in the next 5 minutes and we can run it. One other thing that I actually tell students to do is if you don't like typing like I do, with Google Docs, you can actually talk into it. So if you go to tools and you do voice typing, you can just turn on voice typing and it will do it. So I just turned on voice typing. There you go. So this is a much easier way to get your inputs into the product description. You don't have to worry about typing. It's much easier for most people to do that. So do that, put it into your document, and then run the prompt in a actually run the prompt in the same window, right? Because we're going to do a comparison. So let's take, it's 10:49. I want to be conscious of your time. I definitely want to end at 11 o'clock because I actually do have a client call at that time. Just run the prompt. Actually, don't run it in a new window, run it in the same window so that we can do comparison. So it's 10:50. I'm going to give you another 2 minutes, and we can spend the rest of the 8 minutes talking about the results. So again, I apologize. I know this is a short amount of time. We spent a lot more time in exercises in the boot camp, but given the nature of things. Any questions so far while you guys are working on your prompt? Let me see if there's anything on chat. Marcy, as you create prompts in different windows, how much information is shared between windows or between projects? Should you assume it starts with a blank slate? I think, Marcy, that's a fantastic question. There's actually 2 parts to the question. So let's talk about one in which you're just using different chats and they're not on the project. if you're using just different chats, most of the time, in fact, it's the memory is not shared, right? Which is why I asked you right now to actually put it in the same window because I actually want to compare the two responses. Um, but if you notice that I actually built the user stories for the loan officer in a different window, it's because I didn't want the answers from the first window influencing the answers in the second window. And I usually do that is because the information is not shared. But that's not always the case when you actually use projects. So in projects, it has something called temporary memory. So if I start one chat in a project and then I start another chat in a project, the project is aware of all the chats. But once you close the project, or once you walk away with it and you come back the next day, it has no memory. So it holds the memory for a short amount of time. I don't know exactly how long that time is, but I have noticed that if you do you do chats one after another, it will know what's going on in different chats. But once you end the session and you come back to it the next day, it will not. So hopefully that helps, Marcy. So I think you're absolutely right that your intern is learning simply because of what I just shared with you, especially if it's in projects. Okay, it's 10:52. I want to spend some time on actually evaluating the results. So perfect. So let's go to the next one, right? So we talked about this. Let's just compare the results. So the first thing is first is before you even ask the LLM to compare, just quickly look at the two data sets. And in your mind, just do a quick glance about how relevant are the two results, how clear are they, how user-centric and specific they are to the pain point that you mentioned, and how much detail-oriented are they. Let's just focus on the first four. And I would love for if anybody wants to share their experience. Any volunteers? I know everybody's shy, and it's okay. Um, since this is not my boot camp, I will not pick on you, but that's usually what ends up happening. Anybody wants to just share their experience in chat, so at least we know if it's working or not, if you guys don't feel like being on video? All right, this is a very silent crowd. Let's just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if it's actually giving you better results. How about that? Okay, we have one. Good. Evie, thank you for posting. I'm just curious, did you find that the results in the second with the well-structured prompt was giving you better responses or better quality responses?
Yes, definitely much more advanced and detailed and targeted is what I feel.
Good. Thank you. That is exactly what we're shooting for. Thank you for sharing, Evie. And thank you for volunteering and not being shy. I appreciate that. Marcy, I got a thumbs up from you too. So I'm assuming that you actually had better responses with the second um,
Yeah,
type
I
of
agree.
question.
Yeah, like EV said, yeah, much more targeted. And it's just, I like this approach because it just makes you do this pre-thinking, which we all should do.
Mm-hmm.
Jump in and so it almost, I don't know, I don't want to say create your hypothesis, but it helps you do that
Yeah. It actually forces you to do the thinking ahead of time, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that actually, you bring a really good point, is like a lot of PMs who are relatively new to being PMs like this approach simply because it forces them to think in a much more linear and logical fashion, right?
Mhm.
As you get more experience, sometimes you take shortcuts, which is good and bad at the same time. But I usually like going back to the basics and first principles. So Evie, Marcy, thank you. I'm glad you guys had
Mhm.
had a much better results. Anyone else you want to share? I know we only have 4 more minutes. Okay, well then with that being said, I am going to end our session. Like I said, all the resources that you have, all the resources for this session are here. So if you want to get the playbook, if you want to sign up for my newsletter, actually, or you can connect me on LinkedIn, and you can actually get the recording. I think, like I said, the recording will be up in about 24 or 48 hours. So you can get everything that we went through here today in here. And if you want to continue to advance your skills and you want to get better at using AI, take a look at the bootcamp. We would love to have you. And if you're going to do it, take advantage of the discount. Right? Okay, with that being said, I'm going to end our session if there's no other questions. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much, folks. I appreciate you. Evie, thank you for your kind words. Like I said, thank you again, and I hope to see you guys soon. Yes. By the way, I'm having another lightning session in about 2 weeks about how to use AI to help you grow your product. So much appreciated. Dhaval, thank you for the kind words. Amazing session. Always good to hear. And I'm glad you guys got to experiment. Okay, I will end it now. Raid, thank you very much. Let me stop sharing. And okay, have a good, what's today? Have a good Thursday, folks. Bye for now.